The pen stroke shouldn't have been louder than the jazz curling through Il Gabbiano. Yet Ava Mercer felt every scratch like thunder. She circled 3 quiet words on a bill that could decide whether a man lived or died. The restaurant glowed gold and glass around her. The kind of warmth that never quite touched your skin. Somewhere, between the saxophone and the clink of cutlery, danger was gathering soft. Polite, inevitable. The man everyone called the gentleman sat in his usual corner booth. Back to the wall. Eyes on the door. Sebastian Vale. He didn't raise his voice or flaunt wealth. He rearranged the atmosphere simply by existing. Even the air seemed to hesitate before passing his table. Waiters moved around him like planets orbiting gravity. Polished glassware. Spotless menus. Silver cutlery aligned to mathematical precision. Ava had earned the right to serve him because she never asked questions. She remembered the temperature of his bottled water, 58 degrees exactly, and that he preferred bread without oil. Wine poured 2 fingers from the rim. No amore. No les. For 2 years, she'd studied his habits the way she studied criminal profiles at the university, how power performs normalcy, how predators hide in etiquette. His hands fascinated her. Perfectly manicured. Steady as measured breath hands that could sign contracts or end lives with the same calm certainty. When he tipped, the bills formed exact geometric shapes. Edges, aligned as if drawn with a ruler. Tonight, something broke the pattern. The door opened to a man who looked ordinary by design, mid-40s. Clean-cut. Expression neutral. Too neutral. His effort not to be noticed made him conspicuous. Ava felt it before she saw it. The weight in his right side pocket. The stiffness under the tailored jacket. The kind of stillness that doesn't belong to relaxation, but to waiting. She was delivering breadsticks to table 7, when his reflection flickered in the bar mirror. He ordered Scotch neat. Didn't drink it. Condensation pooled untouched on the coaster, while his gaze orbited Vale's table without ever landing there. Most people would miss it. Ava didn't. Observation was muscle memory now. 3 years of double shifts, and night classes in criminal psychology, had taught her that the smallest details tell the loudest stories. The stranger's right hand never left his pocket. She marked his breathing shallow. Rhythmic. Like someone counting beats before a trigger pull. Sweat gathered at the back of her neck, despite the air conditioning's relentless hum. She forced herself to breathe evenly as she approached the gentleman's table with his check. For the first time in 2 years, she allowed their fingers to touch when she handed him the leather folder. At the bottom of the printed specials, 3 words circled in blue ink waited for him. Hitman behind you. Deal gone wrong. Exit now. His eyes cool grey. Unreadable, flicked from paper to her face. No surprise. No panic. Just the faint tightening at the corners of his mouth. He set his glass down over the message. Tapped once with a finger confirmation, and rose as if stretching his legs after a long meal. Ava drifted back behind the bar. Movements practiced. Deliberate. Her pulse hammering louder than the jazz. The stranger pushed back his stool. The sound was small, but it shattered the room's illusion of calm. Would it-il? A chair toppled. And in that breath of silence, 2 men in dark suits appeared from opposite corners, like pieces sliding into play. Somewhere behind the kitchen doors came the shatter of glass. A muffled pop. Then the heavy sound of something, or someone falling. The trumpet solo never stopped. The manager's face appeared in the doorway. Perfectly blank. Voice steady, as he announced a sudden kitchen incident. Patrons murmured. Confused but compliant. No one asked questions. No one ever did when the gentleman dined here. Ava counted her tips with trembling fingers. Every koinkling fed otsusatori. When she stepped out into the humid savannah night, each street lamp felt like a spotlight. The Spanish moss hung from the trees, like grey ghosts swaying in slow motion. She told herself not to look over her shoulder. Then did anyway twice. Her apartment felt smaller than usual. She slid a kitchen knife under her pillow, lay against the wall, and stared at the ceiling, until dawn diluted the dark. Sleep came only after exhaustion, erased thought. Morning offered no headlines, no police questions, no evidence that anything had happened at all. Il Gabbiano had closed for renovations. A paper sign taped to the glass door pretended the world was normal again. Ava attended her criminal psychology lecture, listening to her professor discuss behavioral triggers while her mind replayed the strangest stillness. The moment before the stool fell, the way Vale's eyes never widened. 2 days passed, like static. She jumped at shadows, drank too much coffee, forgot to eat. Saturday morning, her phone buzzed staff, expected back that evening for reopening. The message was simple, almost cheerful. Her fingers went numb around the screen. When she walked into the restaurant that night, it smelled of lemon oil and new varnish, fresh flowers, new bartender, same corner table. Her reflection in the mirror looked calm enough, only her pulse betrayed her. During her break, she found an envelope in her locker. No name, no seal, just elegant handwriting spelling, Ava Mercer. Inside a small black box and a note on thick cream paper, you saw what others missed. For protection when needed, the box held a silver keychain, heavy, engraved with a single letter S. It sat in her palm like a verdict. She slipped it into her pocket, just as another server whispered, "He's back." The room shifted when Sebastian Vale entered, subtle, like air pressure before a storm. Conversations softened, then resumed with nervous brightness. He looked exactly as before, immaculate suit, unhurried steps, composure carved from marble. When their eyes met, recognition flickered, silent and electric. She poured his water without speaking. He watched her with quiet intensity, as if measuring who she was beyond her uniform. The jazz rolled on, pretending to fill the silence between them. His bodyguards had multiplied. She noticed them now, the way they mirrored angles of sightlines. How each new customer was quietly scanned, then dismissed. It was choreography, but deadly this time. And it fascinated her. Everything she'd studied about hierarchical structure, territory, and control lived here, in front of her, real, breathing, dangerous. The restaurant had become a chessboard. Every entrance a vulnerability, every mirror an advantage. When Vale finally spoke, his voice surprised her lower, warmer than she expected. "The veal scallopini tonight. Would you recommend it?" "It depends," she said. Kafel. Steady. "On whether you trust the chef." A flicker of amusement ghosted across his face. "I'll trust your judgment." Then the service resumed as if nothing unusual had passed between them. But the air had changed. Each time she neared his table, nearby conversations paused, sound bending around their orbit. One of his men nodded slightly when she passed acknowledgement or warning. She couldn't tell. Later, when she brought his espresso, he said quietly, "You never asked my name. After 2 years, after Thursday night, you deserve to know who you saved." Ava steadied the demi-tasse on the saucer, using the moment to breathe. "Knowing your name makes me a liability, not a savior." "Sebastian Vale," he said anyway. "And I don't consider you a liability. Miss Mercer, I consider you an investment worth protecting." Her pulse spiked. He knew her last name. Herskedue. Probably where she lived. "I didn't help you for protection or investment," she whispered. "Then why?" "Because looking away when someone needs help isn't who I am." For the first time, Something softened in his expression. Respect. Maybe. Or recognition of a rule. He thought extinct. The man who came for me, he said. Tone, matter of fact, was sent by the Santoro family. A disagreement escalated. They won't forgive the failure easily. The name tightened her chest. She'd read it in case studies. Precision assassins. Generational wealth. Zero tolerance for witnesses. And now she was a witness. Is it over? She asked. The immediate threat. Yes, he said. But in my world, safety is never permanent. She nodded. Then I guess we both stay observant. He looked almost pleased by her phrasing. The keychain isn't just gratitude. Its meaning will be clear when you need it. She touched her pocket, feeling the cool metal through the fabric. And what if I don't want to be part of your world too late? He said gently. Standing. You entered it the moment you circled those words. The door closed behind him, leaving only the scent of espresso and rain. The next morning, police tape fluttered behind Il Gabbiano. A dumpster 3 blocks away concealed a body. The news never mentioned. No one asked her anything. The restaurant's corner booth stayed empty for a week, marked reserved. When Vale finally returned, the routine reformed, but the world had shifted. Ava worked, studied, breathed, but every sound carried double meanings now. Every reflection she passed became a surveillance mirror. Her professor lectured about Omerta, the code of silence, and she sat there, silent, living proof. The silver keychain never left her pocket. At night, she slept without the knife for the first time. And yet, when the car idled too long outside her building, when strangers met her eyes for a fraction too long, she still felt the weight of that engraved S, cool and constant against her palm, a promise or a warning. She wasn't sure which. By the next week, everything felt closer. The tables seemed smaller, the corridors narrower, the air heavier with unsaid things. The bodyguards didn't multiply so much as divide and recombine, appearing where the eye didn't expect them, one reading a menu he never turned, another laughing at a joke he didn't hear, a third pretending to check the time, while his gaze measured distance, angle, exit. Ava stopped calling them his men in her head, and started calling them a perimeter. The room itself began to speak a language. She could hear edges, echoes, blind spots, intent. Patrol cars slid by Il Gabbiano, with the lazy confidence of routine. Blue strobes off. Just enough presence to say, we remember you. The street learned their schedule. Avadid. 2. She marked the minute they idled. The minute they moved. The exact place where shadows swallowed a license plate. Her notebooks grew dense with arrows and shorthand that would look, to anyone else, like the manic doodles of a tired student. To her, it was a map. Detective Rowan Hale introduced himself like a friend who never used your first name. He came in for coffee, he didn't drink, and asked about a dessert he never ordered. He had the kind of polite curiosity that flattered and pinned you. All at once. Quiet week, he said one Thursday. Watching steam rise from a cup that had cooled. Quiet is a choice, Ava answered. Not sure why the line made him smile. He didn't push. He never did. He asked what time her classes let out, remarking on traffic patterns, as if he were late to things. He asked which nights she worked, shaking his head like a man who'd once done double shifts himself. He asked if Thursdays were still special around here. The way someone might ask if the grouper was fresh today. Gentle. Always. Unnerving. Always. Ava tried not to look at the corner booth when Vale arrived. And failed. He had a way of cutting a path that felt rehearsed even when it couldn't be. The music ironed itself when he entered. The volume staying the same but sounding different. He never rushed. People rushed around him. During the lull between entrees and espresso, he rested a small leather portfolio on the linen and slid it toward her with 2 fingers. As if it contained air and not gravity. For your next semester, he said, like a man stating the weather. And the ones after it? Should you accept? She didn't touch the portfolio. The paper inside looked official enough to have a crest. Her name lived there in ink, tethered to numbers that could unclench the vice on her days. I don't want charity, she said, the word sour in her mouth. It isn't charity, he said. It's investment. He let the words settle. It didn't clatter. It landed. In talent. In perception. In someone who circles 3 words, instead of looking away. There were a dozen replies she could have made. She used none of them. What does your return look like? She asked instead. His smile barely happened. A future conversation, he said. And, in the meantime, the freedom for you to study rather than collapse. The music kept the silence from crystallizing. The portfolio stayed where it was, drawing her like magnet and warning sign. Asset, he said later. Without theatre, you could be one. Or you could remain a waitress who sees too much. Both positions have their risks. He left without checking whether she took the portfolio. It waited, patient as a verdict. When she finally looked inside, the paperwork did not blink. Everything clean. Everything routed. Everything deniable. The morality wasn't printed on any page, which didn't mean it wasn't there. At night, her apartment held its breath with her. The ceiling fan ticked like a metronome she hadn't set. She took the silver keychain from her pocket and turned it in her palm until skin warmed metal. It was too heavy to be decoration, too sleek to be sentimental. There, beneath the engraved S, Asham Shahadenfeld before, she pressed. The letter slid sideways with a soft reluctance and revealed a number etched into steel, as plain as digits could be, and as weighted as a confession. No country code. No hint of origin. Nothing to suggest it belonged to anything as ordinary as a customer service line. She closed her eyes and memorized it the way you memorize a face before a goodbye. Then she did what her professors would have praised, and her conscience would later debate. She bought a cheap phone with cash. Read about secure deletion until words blurred, and erased the number from anything that could outlive a power outage. She pulled the battery, practiced dialing without looking, because hands forget what fear won't, and taped the burner under the bottom of her nightstand, where even panic would remember it. She wasn't building a fortress. She was building a habit. Habits outlast panic. She found herself counting the patrol car that lingered a beat too long outside her building, noting how many times she passed the same sedan on the way to campus, logging in her head the time between the first text from a classmate and the second text asking where she was. She wasn't hiding. She was noticing. It felt like control because it was the closest thing to it. Detective Hale began appearing at transitions, ending of a shift, start of a lecture, the minute between the espresso machine shutting off and the door locking for the night. He never stood in doorways. He stood 3 paces back from them, as if he respected the concept of exit. Ever notice how Thursdays bring out the best manners? He asked once, watching the room in the reflection of a wine fridge. Manners are armor, she said. He nodded like a man who'd lost a fight and still admired the opponent's footwork. Sebastian Vale has excellent manners, he said, casual as weather. Someone mapped his routine for me. It's like a tide chart. He let the implication sit. Tide charts are public, she said. So are reservations? He replied. When you know who to ask. Then he changed the subject to traffic again. She told herself to breathe. Then did. She told herself not to flinch when Vale's name moved in a sentence. then didn't. She told herself she was okay. The keychain in her pocket told her she was not. The Santoro name started showing up in conversations it had no business in. 2 servers whispering that new faces were lingering near the docks. A delivery driver who didn't know he was talking too loud. A professor referencing a case study and looking over the class, as if one of them might raise a hand and say, "I'm in that one." The word blame arrived without an invitation. She'd put 3 circles on a bill and deflected a bullet. They thought her hand had knocked the barrel aside. There is a difference between causation and blame on paper. In practice, people shoot at both. It rained on a Thursday that felt like summer had remembered. It was allowed to be cruel. Vale arrived with storm air woven into his suit. He didn't speak until dessert, when the room's noise climbed high enough to carry secrets away. "Detective Hale has taken an interest in you," he said, as if he were commenting on the pastry. "He's mapped my Thursdays. He likes patterns." Ava didn't feign surprise. "Patterns keep people alive," she said. "Or get them killed," he replied, "depending on who reads them first." Then he asked her to dinner. Not at Il Gabbiano. At his home. It was phrased like the safest thing in the world. Less noise. Fewer eyes. A conversation that needed 4 walls and no witnesses. The invitation carried softness and iron. "It's only dinner," he said, which is something men say when it isn't. She didn't answer then. She took her break in the alley and counted raindrops on a dumpster lid until the number stopped being a number and became weather again. Her phone buzzed with her roommate's text, asking if she'd eaten. Her professor's assignment reminder chimed with cheerful dread. Life tried to assert itself. She let it. For a minute. After closing, Hale waited under the awning, like a man who didn't mind getting wet. "Do you ever go home?" she asked. "I like the quiet after doors lock," he said. "Feels honest." They listened to the rain for a moment. "You're being offered something," he said, without looking at her. "It looks clean because it is. That's the point of clean." She didn't ask how he knew. He wouldn't have answered. "I hope you're good at reading offers," he added. "Because sometimes a thing is both what it is and what it buys." He nodded once and left her with the rain. At home, the keychain waited on her desk, catching the flash of lightning in its letter. She turned it once, twice, and pictured the number beneath. Her future broke into branching roots, the way rivers do when they hit marshlands. All of them looked like water. Not all of them were safe to drink. She thought of tuition, of sleep, of stepping out of a classroom without calculating which direction the campus security camera was pointing. She saw herself refusing and working doubles until graduation, burning the 10 best years of her life to keep the lights on, fusing exhaustion to identity, and calling the fusion virtue. She saw herself accepting and waking up every day with the knowledge that someone who didn't need to remember her name had written it on a ledger. When Vale came in the next time, she didn't delay. "Dinner," she said. "I'll come." He didn't thank her. "You'll have privacy," he said. "And clarity." Neither of those sounded like food. The week between the invitation and the evening stretched like a wire. Hale visited the restaurant and asked for nothing except the time. She gave him the exact minute hers. His. The clocks. He nodded and told her to stay safe, which felt like telling rain not to be wet. The Santoro men were rumors that moved like a draft through a closed room. She caught them in reflections, not faces. The city's river threw back the sky without blinking. On the day of the dinner, Ava dressed like a person going to a conversation, not a war. She put the keychain in her pocket because leaving it behind felt like setting down a life jacket in a boat. She stared at her textbooks and thought of intentions that were good until the moment they weren't. She turned off her lamp and told the room she'd be back before midnight. The way people talk to something they can't bear to lose. The drive felt longer than any distance. It measured. She watched neighborhoods change flavor. Watched porches become verandas. And sidewalks widen into manicured paths. The kind of money that doesn't raise its voice, waits at the end of those roads. She wasn't impressed. She was awake. By the time she arrived, evening had settled into itself. A gate opened with the kind of quiet money buys. She took a breath that didn't quite make it to the bottom of her lungs. She thought of the portfolio, the word investment, the detective's tie chart, the stranger's still hand at the bar, the 3 circles she'd drawn, because compassion had outrun fear. She wondered when compassion had started charging interest. The door in front of her was just a door. Except it wasn't. It held out warmth and silence, like 2 palms. It invited. It warned. It promised that once she crossed, the conversation would be different, and so would she. Ava lifted her hand. The wood was smooth beneath her knuckles. She didn't knock hard. She didn't need to. When the handle turned, she told herself the truth she could live with. She was not being pulled. She was choosing. The lock clicked. The seam broke. And the door eased inward. She stepped through. Dinner began with the sound of rain, rehearsing against old glass. The kind of steady rhythm that makes people honest. Candlelight settled on the table between us, flattening the distance, cutting the world down to wine, flame. And the man I had warned with 3 circles, Sebastian Vale, did not waste language. He poured, tasted, and told the truth, the way some people say, grace, debt, he said, is not a number. It's a bond. He didn't raise his voice to make it heavy. The word carried its own weight. In my world, money explains nothing. Debt is a line from one person to another that tightens under pressure. Sometimes it strangles. Sometimes it holds you when everything else falls away. I tried to smile and failed. That's your pitch for protection. That's my definition of gravity. He said, I protect you whether you join or not. You earned that the moment you refused to look away. He let the promise hang. Then added the condition without apology. But protection without cooperation gets complicated. For everyone, candlelight softened him. But the softness didn't make him safer. It sharpened the paradox. A gentleman whose courtesy hid a calculus. His gaze moved over my face like a careful hand. Never possessive. Never timid. Respect sits strangely next to danger. Like 2 magnets flipped, just so pushing and pulling in the same breath. I'm not asking to be inducted, he said. I'm asking for truth. When I call, you answer. When you see a pattern, you say it out loud. When a room feels wrong, you tell me why before anyone bleeds. That's cooperation. I said. That's survival, he replied. I took a sip I didn't want and set the glass down before my fingers betrayed the shake. And if I say no, you've already said yes to living, he said, almost gently. This is what the yes costs. The house carried a silence that felt curated, no creaks, no drafts, just old bones that had learned how to rest. I could almost forget the city outside, the river, and the men who used it like a blade. Rain shifted its tempo, a leading indicator, and somewhere in the dark of the property, a sensor woke up. The first signal was human, not mechanical, the footfall that didn't belong to staff, the breath of air that moved through a hallway and returned with news. A door opened and closed with accuracy, not haste. Then the message arrived clean. The way bad news does when professionals deliver it. Vehicles, south access, multiple. Ideology ended, where logistics began. Sebastian's posture revised itself by degrees, older rituals shedding. Newer rituals taking the field. He was still the man in the shirt sleeves. But the air around him changed allegiance. He didn't panic. He allocated. Somewhere in the house. Phones chirped without ringing. Somewhere else. Metals med hens. I followed him toward the room where the house kept its memory. Not a lair. Nothing cinematic. Just a space where information arranged itself into something you could argue with. Screens offered a river of night in narrow frames. The south access road was no longer rain and trees. It was angles. Brake lights. Silhouettes. Stepping out and dissolving into the hedges. SUVs. I said, because saying it made it less myth and more math. 3 visible. Likely more deeper in case the first wave fails. They're spreading wide for a pincer. Standard perimeter test before comet. Sebastian didn't ask how I knew. He wanted what I could give. Numbers 8. On the ground that we can see. More in the vehicles. Holding back for reinforcement or extraction. My voice sounded calm because my body had remembered it could be. They assume you're fixed to this address. They'll want to draw fire. Test the east and south. Collapse your people into a choke, where numbers punish training. He nodded like a teacher, hearing the correct vocabulary in a student, who had stopped pretending she didn't belong in the class. Fever on sight, he said. 2 more inbound. Wrong side of the river. Odds are their comfort zone. I said. So change the math. How? The answer rose from the part of me that had spent too many nights turning case studies into muscle memory. Give them a variable they didn't model. Not guns. Authority. Call the detective. An anonymous alert. Armed men at this address. You don't have to name them. You just have to light up the board. He frowned. Not because he disagreed, but because habit argued. Hail complicates everything. Good. I said. Complication is the point. Santoro's men trained for you. They didn't train for uniforms converging at the same time. You don't have to win the fight. You have to collapse their timing. He looked at me for a long second. Like measuring whether the thing he had invested in would yield now or later. An extraction, I pulled the silver keychain from my pocket and turned it so the candlelight found the letter. I didn't need it to open. I needed what it represented. You built this house to hold history. I said. Houses like that don't stand this long without an exit plan, older than their paint. He breathed something like a laugh without sound. Prohibition tunnels. He said. East wing. Straight to the river. Then, we don't stay to count bodies. I said. We funnel. We confuse. We leave. He didn't call it smart. He called it Protocol Exodus. He said into the room. And the room obeyed. The house woke. Somewhere. Doors locked themselves in the order. An architect designed and a paranoid man improved. Somewhere else. Lights dimmed not to hide us, but to move sightlines where defenders needed them. Men with earpieces transformed from staff into the perimeter I had named earlier. There was nothing cinematic about any of it. The opposite. Efficiency is almost boring when it isn't saving your life. On the screens. Son transformación adjusted. One man pointed with 2 fingers. The others pivoted. Their patience scared me more than guns. Patience meant this wasn't a message. It was a task. 3 minutes. A voice said from a place that didn't need a body. Breach on South Garden. Make the call. Sebastian said. Eyes never leaving the map the house had become. I pressed the burner to my ear and let the number do the talking. He didn't say Vale. He didn't say Santoro. I said what a terrified neighbor would say if the lie were true. The operator asked one question too many, and I answered like someone who wanted the call recorded and taken seriously. By the time I ended, the system had woken Rowan Hale on a night when he wasn't asleep anyway. He'll come. I said, oh, He was already coming, Sebastian said. He just needed a reason to turn on the lights. Pressure has a tone. You can hear it behind walls. Feel it in your teeth. The house absorbed the first exploratory strike, like an animal too big to flinch. Then the second came fast. And the third. Men testing entries. Testing nerve. A pane somewhere trembled without breaking. A hedge learned what it meant to bleed. East, Sebastian said. And the word was a door. We moved through a corridor that smelled of brick after rain. The tunnels had not been built for ease. They'd been built for inevitability. Water marked their history in stains. Air moved toward the river, like it had a ticket. My shoulder brushed old stone, and came away with dust that made me think of passwords. Behind us, the house pretended it was still full. Lights blinking on in rooms without people. Speakers breathing voices that weren't there. Misdirection isn't magic. It's choreography. Sirens began as a rumor, and became a plan. They didn't scream yet. They aligned. The city had found us on a map we hadn't drawn. We reached the boathouse with hearts that had learned a new rhythm. Rain met the roof with 1,000 urgent fingers. The vessel waiting there was what money buys when it respects physics' low profile. Quiet power. Anonymity sold. Standard. A man I had met an hour ago handed me a jacket I didn't refuse. Another loosened a rope, like letting go of an argument you'd already won. Last chance to hide. Sebastian said. Not mocking me. Not testing me. Naming a door I could still take. I'd rather move. I said, hiding sounds like waiting to be found. He didn't smile. He looked proud. Which felt more dangerous and more honest. The engine shivered awake with restraint. We slipped from shadow into rain. And the river welcomed us, the way darkness welcomes anything that agrees to be small. The shoreline pulled away. The house receded to a silhouette, described by lightning, somewhere between us and the road. Sirens finally allowed themselves to be loud. Red and blue found the hedges. The drive. The anger that had arrived in black vehicles, and planned to leave in triumph. Plans change when too many clocks disagree. We threaded the middle distance where visibility punishes both sides equally. A second boat might have chased us if the night had belonged to legends. It belonged to logistics instead. Santoro's men were about to have a long conversation with law enforcement about property lines and loaded questions. We had a different conversation to finish. Rain soaked through fabric and reached skin with the intimacy of a confession. Cold clarified everything. I realized I was laughing not loud. Not foolishly. But the kind of laugh your body makes when it recognizes a design that almost killed you and didn't. It startled me. It didn't shame me. Fear has a twin. Relief is its name. What happens now, I asked. Because I didn't believe in the after until it arrived and sat down. Now ver renegociate terms, he said, looking at the water rather than me. You've graduated from asset to ally. The words were ceremony and contract. I should have resented the elevation. He didn't. You can hate a system and still recognize when it stops seeing you as disposable. Dawn isn't a moment. It's a slow permission. The river loosened its fists and revealed its palms. The worst of the storm moved inland to bother people who hadn't earned it. We reached a marina that pretended not to notice us. The kind of place where looking away is policy. Lines were tied. Engines skirted. The world became birds clearing their throats and a sky rehearsing a better mood. We walked along planks that remembered other feet. I shook rain from my hair and felt the weight of the keychain against my leg. Heavier for having proved itself. The portfolio in my memory reopened. Its pages now lit by the night we'd survived. The word investment had changed meanings twice in 2 hours, and didn't feel finished. Sebastian stopped where the pier met the gravel and faced me without performance. The dangerous man had returned to looking like a polite one. Which was the more dangerous form? Balance restored. He said, it wasn't triumph. It was accounting. For now. I answered. Because honesty had become a habit, and I didn't want to break it. They'll regroup. They will. He said. So will we. And Hale's attention complicates their options. He meant it would complicate mine. Too. And I didn't need him to say it. The detective was a different kind of tide, predictable. Until it wasn't. Patient until it turned. The marina staff moved in the practiced choreography of people who have perfected the art of not knowing. A nod here. A clipboard there. An entire biography written in what they declined to ask. Ifelsonly. Impossibly. Older than I had been the day before. The city's skyline unrolled itself across wet morning light. Familiar and foreign at the same time. Tourists would resume being tourists. Students would resume being students. Somewhere, a professor would take attendance and call a name that belonged to a different girl. Sebastian reached into his pocket and produced nothing. The gesture was a ghost of habit, customary tokens, formal thanks. He seemed to think better of it and let his hand fall. I won't insult you with another gift. He said. Not tonight. Good. I said. And meant it. And saw the approval that crossed his face, like a weather pattern he hadn't predicted. We stood in a silence that didn't press. The worst conversations are the ones you don't have, because you might never be ready. We'd already had them. He spoke first. You were right about authority. It moved them faster than fear. You were right about debt. I said. It held. A gull complained above us, as if objecting to metaphor. We both looked up. Then back at each other like we'd been caught. I'll be in touch when the immediate noise dies. He said. I'll pick up when you call. I answered. And I'll say what I see, then we'll both keep breathing. He said. And the line sounded like a prayer that didn't know it was one. He left me there, because leaving is a skill too. I watched him go and didn't follow, which felt like strength. The keychain warmed under my palm. The burner phone was a weight and a promise. The scholarship letter existed in a drawer I could open or burn. I had lectures to attend, shifts to finish, a life to edit. People always ask for an ending. The truth is, you get a balance sheet. Tonight. The numbers aligned. Tomorrow. Someone will try to rearrange them. When that happens, I'll draw what I need to draw circles. Boundaries. Maybe blood. If you're listening to this wondering what choice you'd make, whether to call the number, take the money, open the door. I'll ask you the only honest question I know when the room goes quiet, and the saxophone plays through the violence. Who do you become me? I circled 3 words and bought a debt I couldn't return. Then I paid it down with a plan. What would you have done if you've stayed with me through the rain? The chase. The quiet dawn. Thank you. Stories like this one live on 2 things: breath and attention. If this story pulled you in, take a second to like the video. It helps more than you know. If you want to hear what happens when debts turn into alliances, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Share this with someone who loves crime stories told in a whisper instead of a shout, someone who knows tension lives in silence. And tell me in the comments, if you were me, Ava Mercer, a student who circled 3 words and changed everything, would you have warned him? Would you have walked through that door? Your thoughts might just shape what happens next.